The sun rose over the desert like a slow breath, gentle, golden, and warm. The light brushed across the dry grasslands and the quiet hills, washing over an old man on horseback. His name was Marshal Henry Pike, and he was heading east, toward a town he'd once sworn to never see again. The years had carved lines in his face, silvered his beard, and slowed his draw, but his eyes were steady as they had always been, the kind of eyes that had seen too much, and still found reason to look at the horizon. Tied to his saddle was a tin badge, bent and dull. He hadn't worn it in 15 years. He was halfway to Red Hollow, a mining town near the river, when he spotted smoke on the wind. A campfire, faint but steady. He rode toward it. 2 men sat by the fire, coffee steaming between them. One was Caleb Boone, a broad-shouldered ranch hand barely past 30, his face marked by sun and hard work. The other was Eli Tanner, thin, nervous, a former thief with a kind heart and a twitch that came whenever he lied. Henry dismounted slow, his voice rough but calm. Didn't think anyone camped this far out unless they were running from something. Caleb looked up with a quiet smile. "Ain't running, Marshal. Just heading the same way you are. Red Hollow." Henry frowned. "How'd you know I was a marshal?" Eli nodded toward the saddle. "That badge has seen more action than a preacher's Bible." Henry chuckled softly. "Fair enough." He sat by the fire. The smell of coffee and wood smoke brought back too many memories. They talked a while, about the road, the weather, the quiet ache of men with nowhere left to go. Henry learned that Caleb had once ridden with a cattle outfit that folded after drought hit. Eli had been trying to go straight, carrying tools now instead of pistols. They weren't heroes, just decent men trying to stay decent. When the talk ran out, Henry finally asked, "Why Red Hollow?" Caleb's eyes went distant. "There's a boy there. My brother's son. His pa didn't make it last winter. I promised I'd bring him home." Henry nodded slowly. "Good reason. What about you?" Caleb asked. Henry looked into the fire. The flame danced in the reflection of his badge. "Old debt," he said quietly. "A man I put away years ago sent me a letter before he died. Asked me to bring something back to his son." He pulled a small wooden box from his coat. The name carved on the lid was Isaac Crow, a name Henry hadn't spoken since the war. Eli tilted his head. "You knew him?" Henry nodded. "Knew him too well. He was a lawman once. Good one, too. Till he went the wrong way." The fire crackled between them. For a long moment no one spoke. Only the wind carried the sound of the desert breathing. The next morning they rode together. It felt strange, and Henry hadn't ridden with anyone in years. The rhythm of the horses, the easy talk, the laughter. It filled a quiet space inside him he hadn't realized was empty. At noon they reached a ridge overlooking the canyon. Below, the trail to Red Hollow shimmered like a golden thread. Then Henry saw it. Smoke, darker and thicker than any campfire. He tensed. "That ain't from a cook fire." Caleb followed his gaze. "Town's burning?" "No," Henry said slowly, eyes narrowing. "That's a train wreck." They galloped down the hill, hooves thundering. At the bottom of the canyon, the wreck lay scattered across the sand. A freight train derailed and burning. Crates were smashed open, gold dust spilling like sunlight across the dirt. And standing among the wreckage were 4 men with rifles, faces masked, loading horses with stolen cargo. Henry signaled for silence. The 3 dismounted behind the rocks. Eli whispered, "Bandits?" Henry nodded. "Or scavengers. Either way, they'll kill anyone they see." Caleb clenched his jaw. "We can't just let them take what's left." Henry looked at him, calm, assessing. "You sure you're ready for that kind of fight?" Caleb smiled faintly. "Ain't the first I've had, Marshal." Henry's lips curved slightly. "Didn't think it would be." They moved quick and quiet. Henry took the first man down with a warning shot. Clean, loud, authoritative. "Drop your guns and step away," he barked, voice echoing through the canyon. The men froze, startled by the sudden authority in his tone. The oldest of them sneered. "You alone, old man?" Caleb and Eli stepped from the shadows behind him. Henry's revolver gleamed. Not quite. The bandits hesitated, and too long. The fight was over fast, rough but not cruel. Henry's shot winged the leader. Caleb disarmed another with a clean swing from his rifle stock. Eli, shaking but brave, tackled one before he could reload. When the dust cleared, the gold was safe. The men tied up. Henry looked at the others, bruised, sweating, alive. "Nice work," he said quietly. Caleb grinned. "Not bad for strangers on the road." Henry looked down at the men they'd caught, young, scared, desperate. He holstered his gun. "We'll take him to Red Hollow. Let the law handle what's left," Eli exhaled, trembling. "You still are the law, ain't you?" Henry looked at the badge hanging on his saddle. Maybe just for one more ride. That night, as the desert cooled and stars spread across the sky, the three men sat by a quiet fire again. There was something different this time. Not silence, but peace. A rare kind of peace that only comes after doing something right. Henry took out the badge, ran his thumb over it, and finally pinned it back on his coat. He smiled faintly. "Didn't think I'd wear this again." Caleb raised his cup of coffee. "To second chances," Henry nodded. "To good men on hard roads." The firelight flickered in their eyes, warm and steady. And for the first time in a long time, Henry Pike felt like he wasn't just walking toward the end. He was riding toward the dawn. The desert morning broke wide and bright, stretching gold across the mesas. The three riders, Henry, Caleb, and Eli, left the canyon at sunrise, leading 2 pack horses and 4 captured bandits tied at the reins. The train wreck lay behind them, a plume of gray smoke fading into the sky. Ahead lay Red Hollow, still 2 days away. They rode in silence at first. The sound of hooves and wind was steady, rhythmic, the heartbeat of the open land. Henry rode up front, the old badge glinting on his coat again. It felt strange against his chest, not heavy but right, like something that had been waiting for him to remember who he was. Eli whistled a soft tune, shaky but hopeful. Caleb glanced over. "You always whistle that off-key?" Eli grinned. "Only when I'm nervous," Henry smiled faintly. "You're nervous every minute I've known you." Eli chuckled. "Guess that means I'm consistent." They reached a dry creek bed by noon. The land opened into rolling plains, dotted with rock spires and sagebrush. Henry called for a halt. "We'll water the horses, rest an hour," he said. As they set up camp, Caleb looked at the bound bandits. They were young, no older than 20. One had freckles and a crooked nose. Another couldn't stop trembling. Caleb frowned. "They look more like lost kids than outlaws." Henry nodded. "That's what most of them are once you get the guns out of their hands." Eli poured water into a tin cup for one of them. The boy took it without meeting his eyes. Henry watched. "You learned something, Eli?" Eli shrugged. "Guess it's hard to stay angry when you see the fear up close." The Marshal's eyes softened. "That's the trick of it. Holding firm without hating a man for being broken." Caleb poked at the fire with a stick. "You think there's redemption for all of them?" Henry looked at the horizon. "No, but there's always a choice, and even if it's the last one you get." Later that afternoon, they rode again. Clouds gathered low and heavy in the west, a rare desert storm creeping in. The wind picked up, sharp with dust. Henry's horse tossed its head. "We'll need shelter soon." Eli pointed toward a ridge. "Looks like an old telegraph station up there." They rode hard, wind whipping at their coats. The station was half buried in sand, roof half collapsed, door hanging by a hinge. But it was solid enough to keep out the storm. They got the horses under cover just as the rain hit. It came hard, thunder rolling, water beating the dust into clay. Inside they lit a lantern and set out bedrolls. The captured men sat quiet in a corner, shivering. Henry checked their ropes, then sat near the door watching the rain. Eli rubbed his hands. "Ain't seen rain like this since I was a kid." Caleb nodded. "Feels good, don't it? Like the desert's breathing again." Henry smiled faintly. "That's the kind of storm that brings new grass only if the land's ready for it." Night came fast with the rain. They shared what food they had. Beans, jerky, and strong coffee. The storm outside made the lantern flame dance like it was alive. Caleb leaned back against the wall. "So, Marshal," he said, "you never said what you're taking to Crow's boy." Henry reached into his coat and pulled out the small wooden box again. He turned it in his hands, tracing the name carved into the lid. "It's his father's badge," he said softly. "The man saved my life once. Then I took his freedom when he lost his way. He wrote me last month from a prison in Yuma. Said his boy ought to know what kind of man he was before the drink took him." Eli's voice was quiet. "That's a heavy errand." Henry nodded. "Some debts can't be paid in gold." The room fell silent again except for the rain. Around midnight, Caleb stirred awake to the faint sound of footsteps outside. He grabbed his rifle and peered through a crack in the door, shadows moving between flashes of lightning. "Marshal," he whispered. Henry was already awake, revolver in hand. "I see 'em," Eli sat up, blinking. "More bandits? Maybe friends of the ones we caught," Henry muttered. Lightning split the sky, and for a moment they saw 3 riders circling the station, shapes black against the rain. "Stay low," Henry said. "We'll wait 'em out." But the door burst open with a gunshot before he finished the sentence. A man lunged in, firing wild. The lantern shattered, throwing sparks across the room. Henry dropped him with a clean, controlled shot. Caleb shoved a table over for cover. Eli pulled the captives down to keep them safe. More shots cracked from outside, echoing through the storm. Henry shouted, "Hold fire till you see 'em," thunder answered. Rain poured in through the roof, cold and relentless. Caleb returned fire between flashes of lightning, saw a rider fall, another flee into the dark. When the shooting stopped, only the rain remained. Henry stepped into the doorway, gun still steady. The night was empty again, only hoofprints fading into the mud. He holstered his weapon. "They're gone." Eli exhaled hard. "We just can't ride a peaceful mile, can we?" Henry gave a small smile. "That's the West for you. Always testin' if you're still worth your boots." By dawn, the storm had passed. The desert gleamed wet and clean, the kind of beauty that comes after chaos. They saddled up, the captured men still quiet, the air smelling of rain and sage. Caleb looked up at the brightening sky. "Think they'll come back?" Henry shook his head. "No, the kind that run in storms don't chase their ghosts after." Eli climbed into the saddle. "So we keep riding?" Henry nodded. "We keep riding. Red Hollow's waiting, and there's still good to do before the sun sets." They turned east again, the golden light catching their faces. 3 men, scarred but unbroken, riding side by side through the wide, living world. And for a brief moment, as the wind carried the scent of wet earth, Henry felt the weight of his badge lighten, not because the burden was gone, but because he wasn't carrying it alone anymore. By the second evening, the storm had passed into memory, and the desert stretched ahead clean and glistening under the low sun. The riders crested a ridge and saw Red Hollow below, a small town hugging the dry riverbed, its rooftops glowing rust-red in the fading light. Smoke rose from chimneys, and somewhere a piano played a tired tune through open windows. Henry drew in a breath. "Been near 5 years since I rode into a town wearing this badge." Caleb smirked. "You sure they'll be happy to see you?" Henry's eyes narrowed, the shadow of a smile tugging at his mouth. "Happiness ain't what I expect from men who remember the law." They started down the ridge, the horses trotting easy. Eli looked around in wonder. "After all that desert, this looks almost like home." Henry grunted softly. "Then don't blink. Towns like this fade as quick as they shine." At the edge of town, a weathered sign read, "Welcome to Red Hollow, Pop 243." They passed a livery stable, a shuttered blacksmith shop, and the small sheriff's office that looked older than the town itself. Henry dismounted, tied his horse, and nodded to the others. "I'll see the law first." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "You think the laws still breathe in here?" Henry smiled faintly. "If it ain't, we'll give it a heartbeat." Inside the office, dust hung in the air. A young deputy looked up from behind the desk, barely 20, hat too big, hand hovering near his holster out of habit more than skill. "Help you, sir?" Henry stepped into the light. "Name's Marshal Henry Dawes out of Yavapai. Got prisoners for transport and a message for Sheriff Boyd." The deputy blinked. "Boyd's gone. Left 2 years back after the drought hit. Ain't been a real sheriff here since." Henry exhaled, nodding slowly. "Then I reckon the place has been looking for one." The deputy swallowed. "You mean—" "I mean I'll hold the post till the marshal's office sends word." Caleb leaned against the doorway, smirking. "Didn't even unpack your saddle and already signing up for another fight." Henry ignored him, setting the prisoner's papers on the desk. "Lock these men up safe. Treat 'em decent. They're thieves, not monsters." The deputy nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." Eli gave Henry a quiet look. "You sure about this, Marshal? You didn't come here to wear the badge again." Henry's gaze drifted to the empty cells. "Maybe I didn't. But a man don't get to choose when he's needed." They found a small inn that night, 4 rooms and a pot of stew that smelled like salvation. As they ate, laughter floated from the saloon across the street. The town seemed alive again, just faintly, like an old tune remembered after years of silence. Caleb poured coffee into Henry's cup. "You ever think of settling down, Marshal? Hanging that badge up for good?" Henry stirred the drink. "I tried once. Didn't take." Eli looked up. "Why not?" Henry stared into the cup, seeing ghosts only he knew. "Because peace don't hold when you've buried too many men to earn it." Silence fell, but not the heavy kind, the respectful kind that comes when men understand a truth they've all touched. Later, Henry stepped outside. The night air was cool, the sky clear and vast. Across the street, the saloon buzzed with low music. A group of miners laughed over cards, their faces bright under lamplight. For a moment, Henry almost smiled. Then the door swung open, and a familiar voice froze him in place. "Henry Dawes. Thought I heard the ghost whisperin' your name." Out of the doorway stepped Jed Crow, the son of the man whose badge Henry carried. He was tall, lean, eyes like steel, a revolver low on his hip. Henry's voice was quiet. "Jed, I was coming to find you." Jed snorted. "I reckon you were. Heard my old man sent word before he passed." Eli and Caleb came to the door behind Henry, tense. Henry held up a small wooden box, the same one he'd carried across the desert. "Your father wanted you to have this. Said you should know the kind of man he tried to be before the drink and the years took him." Jed didn't take it. He just stared. "You locked him up." "I did," Henry said. "And I'd do it again. But I never stopped respecting him. He saved my life in Abilene when I was green and stupid. Told me a man's worth ain't in what he keeps, but what he can still give away when he's got nothing left." Jed's jaw tightened. The saloon behind him had gone quiet. "You talk pretty for a man who sent my father to die in a cage." Henry didn't flinch. "Maybe I do. But this badge was his once. He wanted you to carry the truth, not the hate." He set the box on the railing and turned to go. Jed called after him. "You think that makes us even?" Henry stopped. "No. I think it makes us both men who lived long enough to understand what forgiveness costs." And then he walked away into the cool night. The next morning, the town stirred early. The deputy reported that 2 of the captured bandits had escaped in the night, slipped the locks, stole horses, and vanished east. Henry's face hardened. "They'll head for the canyons near Devil's Spine. That's where their kind hides." Caleb strapped on his rifle. "Then I reckon we're going hunting again." Eli grinned. "And here I thought we were finally getting some rest." Henry looked out at the sunrise. Red Hollow bathed in gold, smoke curling gentle from the chimneys. He touched the badge on his chest. "Rest's for men who've already found what they're looking for. We ain't there yet." They saddled their horses once more, the sound of hooves echoing down the empty street. As they rode out, Jed Crow stood in the doorway of the saloon, holding the wooden box in his hands, tears glinting in the morning light. For a brief second his eyes met Henry's, not with anger, but understanding, and that silent exchange was enough to set both men free. The trail to Devil's Spine cut through a country that looked carved by anger. Jagged cliffs, narrow passes, and dust that clung to the skin like guilt. By noon, the riders, Henry, Caleb, and Eli, were miles from Red Hollow, their horses breathing heavy under the sun. Henry rode silent, scanning the horizon. The escaped bandits had a day's lead, but not more. The desert always told its stories to those who listened. Hoofprints in soft sand, broken cactus stems, the faint smell of fire smoke carried by the wind. Caleb glanced over. "You think they know we're coming?" Henry nodded. "They know. The kind that runs always feels the law behind him, even when it ain't." Eli spat dust from his mouth. "Then they'll fight." Henry's voice was low. "So will we." By late afternoon, they reached the mouth of the canyon. It rose ahead like a scar in the earth, cliffs of red stone twisting up toward a cruel blue sky. The Devil's Spine. Caleb frowned. "Heard stories about this place. Men go in and never come out." Henry's jaw tightened. "Men who don't keep their heads, maybe. The land don't kill. Pride does." They dismounted, leading the horses along the narrow path. Every sound echoed. The jingle of spurs, the shift of gravel, the whisper of wind. Halfway through, they found signs of a camp. Ashes still warm, 2 tin cups left behind. Eli crouched down. They were here this morning. Henry studied the prints. 2 men. One limps. Other carries the supplies. They'll hole up higher near the ridge. Caleb checked his rifle. Then we best move quiet. The sun dipped low, painting the canyon in long shadows. The air turned cool, filled with that dry, metallic scent that always came before night. Henry raised a hand. Stop. Up ahead, the echo of a cough. Then another. The Marshal drew his revolver. They're close, Eli whispered. You want 'em alive? Henry's eyes didn't leave the rocks. If they give me the choice. A voice echoed through the canyon, sharp and desperate. Stay back. We ain't going to hang.
Henry called out, calm and steady.
You're not wanted for killing. You come down, you'll face a cell, not a rope. Silence. Then a shot rang out, ricocheting off the stone beside his head. Caleb hissed. That answer your question? Henry crouched behind a rock. Eli, circle left. Caleb, cover me. Eli moved like a ghost through the shadows, dust shifting under his boots. The bandits fired again, wild, frightened shots that screamed panic more than aim. Henry advanced slow, methodical. He didn't fire back. He wanted their fear to burn out before their lives did. Then Eli's voice cut through the canyon. Drop it! A scuffle, a grunt, and the echo of metal hitting stone. When the dust cleared, the fight was over. Eli stood with one man pinned under his knee, young, trembling, blood on his cheek. Caleb had his rifle trained on the other, who sat clutching a wounded leg. Henry approached, holstering his gun. No more running. You're done, the wounded man spat. You ain't taking us back. Henry looked down at him, eyes full of weary truth. I ain't here to take you back. I'm here to take you forward, to face what's due and start over. The man laughed bitterly. Start over? Ain't nothing left to start. Henry kneeled beside him. There's always something left. Question is whether you're man enough to face it. The bandit met his gaze, and then for the first time the anger faded. He nodded once. All right, Marshal. They made camp near the ridge that night. The fire was small, the stars sharp and endless above. Eli handed the prisoners food and sat quiet beside Henry. Caleb stared into the flames. You really believe they can change? Henry's eyes flicked toward the younger outlaw, now asleep beside the fire. I've seen men kill for less and repent for more. The West don't hand out forgiveness easy, but it don't take it away either. Caleb poked the embers. You sound like a preacher. Henry smiled faintly. Nah, just a man who's tired of burying boys who never had a chance. Eli nodded slowly. Then maybe you're doing something right, Marshal. Henry looked at the horizon, the black ridge rising against the stars. Maybe. But the right thing don't always feel clean. Sometime past midnight, a low rumble woke them. At first, it sounded like thunder. But thunder didn't shake the ground. Rock slide, Caleb shouted. The ridge above them gave way, stones tumbling down in a roar of chaos. The fire scattered. Sparks leapt into the dark. Eli grabbed the horses, yanking them back. Henry dove toward the prisoners, dragging one clear as the ground split beneath them. When the dust settled, the canyon was silent again, broken by the soft whimper of pain. Caleb was pinned under a slab of rock, blood running down his arm. Henry rushed to him, straining to lift it. Hold on, Caleb! The outlaw with the wounded leg crawled over, teeth clenched. Here, I got it. Together they pushed until the stone rolled free. Caleb gasped, clutching Henry's arm. You still think they can't change? Henry said, breathless. Caleb managed a weak grin. Reckon I'll keep my mouth shut. The outlaw nodded, blood on his hands, eyes full of something new. Dignity. Henry looked at him and said quietly, You'll walk free after this. Not 'cause you earned it, but 'cause you chose to be better when it mattered. By dawn, they rode back toward Red Hollow, slower this time. Weary but unbroken. The desert around them was calm again, washed clean by the night wind. Caleb leaned forward in his saddle, arm bandaged. Guess the devil's spine gave us all a lesson. Henry nodded. The devil don't live in the rocks, Caleb. He lives in men till they remember they ain't him. Eli smiled faintly. So what now? Henry looked east, where the first light touched the far hills. Now we go home. There's fences to mend and men to trust again. And with that, the 3 riders turned toward the morning, carrying not prisoners, but the proof that even in the hardest land, good could still be found. The sun rose slow over the desert, pale gold spilling across the mesas, the air still cool and sharp. The three riders moved in silence, the sound of hooves steady against the hard ground. The two former bandits rode behind them unbound now, heads lowered in quiet thought. Red Hollow shimmered ahead in the distance like a promise, a small town clinging to life in a world that kept trying to forget it. Henry rode up front, his coat torn and dusted with red earth. His eyes were tired, but there was a calm there, the kind that comes after a man finally stops running from himself. Eli rode beside him, humming low, the same off-key tune as before. Caleb followed, his arm bandaged, his expression soft, almost peaceful. "Never thought I'd be glad to see that sign again," Caleb said, nodding toward the crooked post that read, "Welcome to Red Hollow." Henry smiled faintly. Funny thing about towns like this, you leave 'em for a day feels like a lifetime. They rode down the main street as the town stirred awake. Children ran to fetch water, a blacksmith stoked his forge, and an old man swept the porch of the general store. People looked up as the riders passed, some curious, some wary, but there was a quiet respect too. Henry guided the group straight to the sheriff's office. The young deputy rushed out, eyes wide. "Marshal!" Word came down from Yavapai. "They said to expect you back weeks ago." "We thought," Henry dismounted slowly. "We were delayed. The Devil's Spine ain't a place that lets go easy." He nodded toward the two former outlaws. "These men won't need cells. They've already served their time in the ways that count." The deputy hesitated, then nodded. "Understood, sir." Henry turned to the men. "You'll stay in town. Help the smith rebuild the corral. Earn your keep honest. After that, you decide who you want to be." They nodded, speechless. One of them, the younger, looked up, voice trembling. "Marshal, why are you doing this?" "We don't deserve it." Henry studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "Neither did I once." And that was all. Later that morning, Henry stood outside the saloon. The door creaked open and Jed Crow stepped out again, the wooden box still in his hands. He crossed the street slowly. "Heard you came back. Folks been talking?" Henry nodded. "Good or bad?" Jed smiled faintly. "Depends who you ask." He opened the box. Inside was the old badge, polished now, gleaming in the sunlight. "I've been thinking," Jed said. "My pa wore this for years. Maybe it's time somebody in this town did again." He held it out. Henry shook his head. "That badge belongs here and not on me," Jed frowned. "You're the only man who—" Henry raised a hand. "I'm just passing through, son. But this place, these people, they need someone who's gonna stay, someone who remembers both sides of the law." He nodded toward the badge. "That's you, Jed. If you're willing to be better than the man I had to arrest." For a long moment, Jed didn't move. Then he looked down at the badge, eyes wet. "You think I can live up to that?" Henry smiled softly. "No one lives up to it. You just live with it. That's enough." Jed took a deep breath and pinned the badge to his chest. The moment was quiet, powerful, like sunrise after a long night. They spent the day helping repair fences, mend windows, and fix the telegraph line that the storm had torn down. Eli climbed onto the roof of the inn, hammer in hand, grinning the whole time. Caleb worked with the smith, his strength returning with every swing. Henry stood by the corral, watching them, a sense of something rare stirring in his chest. Peace. Eli hopped down from the roof, wiping sweat from his brow. "You know, Marshal, this ain't a bad look for us. Sun work, no bullets flying?" Henry chuckled. "Don't get used to it. The West has a way of reminding you when you start feeling safe." Caleb walked over, resting a hand on his saddle horn. "You think we'll ever stop riding?" Henry looked toward the horizon, the far blue line where the desert met the sky. "Someday," he said, "but not today." That evening, the town gathered near the saloon. Someone had built a fire and music drifted from a fiddle, slow and warm. The men laughed, shared food, and told stories. Henry sat on the porch steps watching the flames dance. Jed joined him, hat in hand. "Town feels different tonight," Henry nodded. "Feels alive." Jed looked out at the crowd. "You ever think the West'll be like this for good one day?" Henry smiled faintly. "The West ain't about what it becomes, Jed. It's about what it survives." Jed nodded slowly, the words sinking deep. Then he looked at Henry, serious now. "You riding out tomorrow?" Henry nodded once. Sunrise. There's a world past these hills still needin' a steady hand. Jed extended his hand. You ever ride back, you got a home here. Henry shook it firmly. You keep it that way, and maybe I will. Before dawn, the riders saddled their horses one last time. Eli adjusted his hat, smiling. So where to, Marshal? Henry mounted up, gaze fixed east where the first light broke across the plains. Wherever the trail leads, Caleb chuckled. That's a mighty long list of places. Henry grinned. Then we best start early. They rode out as the sky turned pink and gold, their silhouettes fading into the rising sun. The town of Red Hollow watched them go. A marshal without a home, a drifter with a heart, and a gunman who'd learned peace. The fire from the night before still smoldered, its smoke curling gently into the morning air, a reminder that even in the roughest land, light could rise again, and as they rode east, the dawn spread before them like a road made of gold. Henry touched the badge on his chest one last time and whispered, almost to himself, still ridin', Marshal, still ridin'.